Hello, my name is Victoria Farrow. There's nothing more fun than gathering friends and family together for a meal. But if you're hosting a larger group, it can become overwhelming. Today we're going to talk about how to comfortably and safely cook for a crowd. What makes a crowd varies. If you routinely cook for just one or two, a crowd might be 4 or 5. If, on the other hand, you daily cook for a large family, your idea of a crowd will be different. Fortunately, the steps involved work for any larger than usual gathering. To successfully cook a large meal, it's important to develop a realistic plan, prepare as much as possible in advance, schedule carefully, and record and monitor your progress throughout. Excited you've decided to host a meal, you might want to immediately start planning the menu. Slow down and be sure you first know exactly who's coming, how they'll be served, and where they'll eat. Finger foods are easy to eat standing, but many foods require your being seated, often at a table. Your available space and furniture may limit your guest list or your menu. Every space has its limits, and it's easy to overdo. In the photo on the right, you'll note that a chest and table had to be relocated to accommodate additional seating for a dinner party I didn't plan as well as I might have. When you have your guest list and seating plan, begin developing a menu based on those details, and also on your cooking ability, your previous cooking successes, seasonal ingredients available, and the time and money you can afford to invest. It's often quite challenging to juggle all these variables. It's critical to record your menu draft on paper. The menu becomes a guide for shopping, scheduling, preparation, and serving, and all of those things sometimes make menu revisions necessary. Be sure to consider the work your menu requires. Will the combination of dishes take more time than you have available, or too much work to be done at the last minute? Most of us don't have huge commercial ranges like these, capable of handling endless pans those final hours. You might need to make substitutions to distribute dishes between the stovetop and the oven. I try to eliminate as much last-minute cooking as possible. Dishes that can be made in advance and just warmed up or served cold or at room temperature are wonderful for large events. I rarely include more than one dish that must be made at the last minute. That brings up another consideration. Your refrigerator needs to be able to handle these dishes made in advance, as well as any refrigerated ingredients for last-minute cooking. Such planning is important for less stressful cooking, but also for food safety. Your preparation schedule must enable food to be kept out of the temperature danger zone. You want food colder than 40 degrees or warmer than 140 degrees whenever possible. When I have a manageable menu, I print or photocopy all the recipes I'm using and determine the number of batches needed. Just rotely increasing each recipe based on its number of servings doesn't always work. For example, if you're serving several entrees or sides, you'll need less of each. Dishes do compete with each other. How a dish will be served will also affect the amount needed of each. If chicken is served as a whole piece, you'll need a full piece for each person. If the dish involves sliced chicken, you'll need less because some people will only take a slice or two. The size spoon used to serve a dish will also affect how much is taken. The larger the spoon, the more you'll need. Dinner plate size will also affect how much people serve themselves. There are many online calculators and charts that can help you determine how much to make for each specific type of food. Sometimes it's enough to just add several different dishes rather than increasing the amount made of each. I determine how many batches of each recipe I'll make and write the recipe title plus the number of batches on the working menu. For Thanksgiving during COVID, we made takeout meals for friends. At left is the full menu with the batches I planned on making for the meal, part of which is shown at right. To double a recipe, you can separately make 2 single batches or make 1 double batch. I generally don't make more than a double batch all at once. Most dishes become difficult to cook evenly when they become too large. I always write on my printed menu the modified quantities. It's too difficult to make a mistake multiplying in your head. If doubling a recipe, it's best to multiply the seasonings by only 1.5 and then adjust as needed at the end. Once you have a tentative menu, you can develop shopping lists, one for well in advance and another for closer to the meal. Be sure to also include needed supplies for service and house preparations. Next, schedule anything that can be done well in advance. Here are some of the items on my advanced Thanksgiving dinner preparation list. Notice even a small task like crushing crackers is on the list. It's a small task but involves locating items and cleanup, which is great to have out of the way. For an in-person event, I would also do things like iron napkins, gather silverware, gather any plates or bowls needed, fill salt and pepper shakers, and things like that. The week of the event, develop a detailed schedule, especially for the day of the meal. I usually work backwards, drafting the schedule for what I can handle the day of the event, and then scheduling anything else for earlier in the week, juggling my goals of excellent food quality and a manageable schedule, while also ensuring food safety. By midweek, these are the kinds of tasks you can complete: preparing foods that will not lose quality by being made in advance and held safely, and any advance preparation of ingredients possible. When planning the final week, it's especially important to be sure your plan and schedule allow you to keep food from remaining in the danger zone of 40 to 140 degrees. If you cook foods in advance, be sure to cool them quickly. Rather than putting the hot food in a tall, deep container, put it at least temporarily in a flatter, shallow container, and put that container in a container of ice. If you must use a deep container, insert a container of ice in the center, as shown in the inset photo. You want to cool food as quickly as possible. It really helps to prepare any ingredients in advance that you can. The vegetables that will be sautéed for my cornbread dressing are chopped and stored together as they'll be cooked at the same time. I usually tape a note to the top of the container. You won't think you'll need the note, but if you also chop some carrots and leeks and other items, your refrigerator begins to look like this, and you'll find you can't remember what is what. For our Thanksgiving meal, I also peeled and cut potatoes several days in advance, stored in cold water. Pearl onions can be tedious to peel, so that was also completed ahead of time, so they could be freshly cooked later. Cornbread and bread cubes were prepared in advance for the cornbread dressing. Pie crusts and fillings for pies were made in advance too. Some pies are fine baked the day before. It's so critical to do everything you can in advance. Plan the final day especially carefully. As I mentioned before, I start with the final day and work backward, moving anything I can't manage that day to an earlier time. Keep in mind that anything you don't complete on time will have to be added to that final day. I also work backwards when planning my cooking and baking schedule, starting with the time food is to be put on the table and working backwards. Keep in mind that if multiple dishes are in the oven, they will take longer. If a dish can be held well, I will bake that earlier and use equipment to keep it warm. My cooking schedule always includes the amount of time and the temperature for each dish. Keep in mind that anything you cook in advance must be kept above 140 degrees to safely hold it. I use my electric oven to keep multiple dishes warm. Crock pots, toaster ovens, and Instapots can also be used. The lowest setting on these devices is normally above 140 degrees safety level. As long as you have heated your food to 165 degrees or higher before putting it in the warming device, it can be held safely. Here are a few things I have found helpful for smooth last-minute work and serving. I set my table well in advance. If I'm setting it the day before the event, I turn glasses and plates upside down. Note the table features many small vases rather than a large arrangement. Having to peek around tall or wide flowers can really hamper good conversation. To plan plates and bowls for serving, I put a note on each one indicating what food will be served in it. That way you're certain to have a dish for everything. As early as I can, I position serving bowls and utensils on the buffet table or on the dining room table if serving family style. If the food is refrigerated in its serving bowl, I put the label on the table so the space is kept available. If a dish has ingredients that must be added at the last minute to keep them crisp or fresh, I prepare the additional ingredient, wrap it in foil, and set the packet on top of the dish. That way there's no searching for the topping or forgetting to add it. I like to make simple signs for labeling dishes to help people know what they're taking. If you have guests with food allergies or preferences, this can be a way of alerting them to any dishes with meat, nuts, gluten, dairy, or other ingredients. I try to have desserts all plated and stored out of the way early in the day. That way you don't need to rush to the kitchen at the end of dinner. Note the serving utensil is with the plate. I will often pre-cut cakes and pies for easier serving, to avoid the need for last-minute attention. Note that the serving utensils and dessert forks are also ready for use. If a dessert is fragile and can't be covered with plastic wrap, I'll find a bowl that can cover it, so it again will be ready to serve. I hope some of these techniques and tips will help you enjoy cooking for a crowd. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel so you'll be notified when I release new videos. Happy entertaining!